we need to work a little bit with geography and maps. And perhaps you all already know this and have an idea about this, but this was something that really struck me this particular week. The passage opens with the news that John the Baptist has been arrested. Now we know that John was preaching and baptizing people. He was preaching in the wilderness. He was down by the Jordan River. He was in Judea, which means he was in the territory where Jerusalem is located. So just to make this as generalized as possible, this is sort of more part of southern Israel. And so Jerusalem's here, the Jordan River runs a little bit outside that, there's some wilderness area there. So Jerusalem's here, John's working here. And, and John was saying things that King Herod didn't really appreciate, and since he was located in a relatively, an area close to him, Herod was able to send out his people and capture him and arrest him. So we're told that Jesus hears of John's arrest, and we don't know where in his particular story. We know that just previous this in the passage, Jesus has traveled from Nazareth, where he lives. Now, if Jerusalem's down here, Nazareth is sort of up here, okay? So it's a fair distance. He had to travel a fair distance down to around Jerusalem to Jordan to find John. He gets baptized, and then we're told the Spirit takes him out to the wilderness. We don't know if it's the same wilderness where John is or someone similar. He's there for 40 days. He comes back. He hears John's been arrested. He goes home. So now the question is, where's Jesus going to go from there? We understand he begins his ministry at this point. So, for us, looking back on this, we think of Jesus as this incredibly powerful person, as this leader, as this teacher, as this great preacher. And so we imagine, and all this is true, so we imagine that Jesus, who lives up in this little town Nazareth, is probably going to Jerusalem, which is the center of all that goes on really in Israel. It's where the most powerful people live. It's where the most wealthy people live. It's where the political stuff happens. It's where all the big religious, that's where the denominational headquarters is, It's this whole thing. That's where it's going on in Jerusalem. So we expect that's where Jesus is going to go. But he doesn't. So Nazareth's here. Jerusalem is here. We're told Jesus goes to Capernaum, which is up here, top side of the Sea of Galilee. It's pretty far up north in the nation of Israel. It's really pretty far away from Jerusalem. And not only geographically, but Capernaum is this place, because it's a trade center and because it's located so far away from Jerusalem, where most of the defensive forces of Israel were, it became a point in which other countries would come in and conquer it, because it was a trade center. It was good to be able to control a trade center. So they would come into Capernaum, they would take it over, they'd do whatever they want, and then some other country would come in, take over Capernaum, do whatever they want. So Capernaum was really this town that was constantly in flux, was often in a state of somewhat of devastation due to being conquered by another country, and was made up of a very diverse group of people. There are people who are Jewish who are living in Capernaum, because it is technically within Israel. But there are people of a whole lot of other faiths and practices and traditions, known generally as Gentiles in Scripture's language. So Jesus chooses not to go to the center of power, but rather up to this outpost in Capernaum, where the people are not all like him. They don't all speak his language. They don't all have his same faith. It's a rough and tumble place. What's up with that? Why would Jesus do that? Why would Jesus choose to start his ministry up there? That doesn't quite seem to make sense. And I have to admit that I always thought, when Jesus leaves Nazareth, he goes to Capernaum, he starts his ministry, I had this sense that it was all kind of happening in this area that wasn't too far from Jerusalem. They were all pretty closely connected and located. And that's just not true. Jesus is off in the outskirts. He's out there. And he makes that choice deliberately. He went to Nazareth. He could have chosen to go to Jerusalem. He could have chosen to go to the desert where John had been. He could have chosen anywhere, yet he chooses to go to this place that is incredibly diverse, is poor, and is rough and tumble. God has said to we humans, since the beginning of human-God interactions that we have been given stories that were told orally and then written down, since that time, God has said to us, you know what? I do not only live in the most luxurious, most powerful places that are, at least humans view it. That's not the only place I'm there. Yes, I'm there. I exist there. But I also exist out in these outposts. I also exist out in these other places. And maybe, just maybe, if I had my choice, if I could go somewhere, that's where I'd go. Let's think about that for just a second. Why? Why would God make that choice? Well, maybe it's because God really does like the diversity of what God has created. Maybe God really enjoys hearing a whole bunch of different languages and seeing people of a whole bunch of different cultures and backgrounds and religious faiths together. Maybe God really appreciates the rough and tumble life because it makes people recognize that they need somebody other than themselves. Jesus chooses to go to Capernaum, and he is showing us and teaching us something, and we've missed that message for the most part because we don't choose diversity. We don't choose difference. We're uncomfortable with going to places where people speak different languages, where they have different backgrounds, that we can't figure them out and put them into boxes. We are really uncomfortable with that. We prefer when everybody is sort of more like us. And you know what we've done? We've created a vision that Jesus is just like that. That Jesus is just like us. He speaks our language, English, right? Of course, Jesus spoke English. He was the same sort of economic background that we were basically, he did and lived life pretty much like we did. No, he didn't. That's just not the reality. And the more that we can come to understand that, the better off we're going to be. This next part of this passage is Jesus calling his disciples. And we've heard these call passages, and we're generally amazed by it, and we should be amazed by it because Jesus has been working for a while. We hear he's been preaching, he's been teaching, and then he goes out and we're told, and he's walking along the Sea of Galilee, and he sees Simon Peter and Andrew, and he says, "Follow me," and they do it. They were told they leave their nets, and they follow him. And then walking, maybe it's the three of them, maybe it's just Jesus on his own, we don't know. A little further, comes across James and John. They're out in a boat with their father Zebedee. He says, "Hey, come follow me." They drop their nets, they get out of the boat, and they follow him. Amazing. people would just give up everything in their life to follow Jesus. And that's a whole other sermon or story. So we'll just let that be amazing, that people would choose to do that. But you know what we miss in hearing that story and that amazingness? Simon Peter and Andrew are fishing from the shore. You know what that means? They're poor. They're about as poor as fishermen get. Because if you don't own a boat, it entirely limits you to where you can fish. If you have to fish from the shore, you can only walk so far, you can only go so far. The poorest fishermen fish from the shore. And Jesus picked two of them. Come follow me. Now, James and John are in a boat. So they're wealthier. They have a little more money, at least a little more, and maybe a whole lot more. They're working with their father John. They're not actually fishing. They're mending nets. They might be part of a family business. We don't even know how big the Zebedee business is. We just don't know. But they're a different economic class. And Jesus calls them too. It says, come follow me. So we're taught, though we don't always hear, that it doesn't really make any difference if you're poor, or middle class, or rich. Jesus calls all of us. And he calls us together. And he has this expectation that we're actually going to be able to get along and communicate with each other because we have work to do together. And then we're told that Jesus really begins to take on his ministry. He's preaching, he's teaching, he's healing people. People are bringing him folks who have been sick for their entire lives, and he's curing them, he's healing them. And then we throw in this line of scripture that says, and the people from Syria. Oh yeah, we've heard that word before, right? The country who's hell-bent on destroying itself. You know what? The people that lived in Syria then, they weren't Jewish. Yet they heard that Jesus was healing people a little ways over the border. So they packed up their people who were ill and sick, and they brought them to Jesus. And do you know what he said? Sorry, you're an immigrant, you're a refugee, I'm not going to bother with you. No. He healed them. He healed them. And apparently he didn't do this just once or twice, because we're told that the news of what Jesus was doing spread to many different places, and people from all different areas inside Israel and outside Israel heard and came to see him. The power to heal the world and the people in it does not necessarily or only reside inside the Beltway. It does not only reside inside the halls of power, inside the banks on Wall Street, inside the various capitals of the world where the most powerful and politically connected. It is not inside the halls of the Pentagon. That is not the only place where power resides. And we have fooled ourselves into believing that. And now we really need to stop. We need to take notice of how it is that Jesus chooses to do ministry. Right from the very beginning, how he chooses to do ministry, to walk away from all that. Perhaps he was concerned Perhaps he was concerned that the same thing that happened to John would happen to him. That because the people in power didn't like what he had to say, they would arrest him and kill him. Well, they eventually do. And Jesus doesn't run away. We're told he makes regular trips to Jerusalem. He knows he's putting his life in danger. It's not that he's running away. It's that he recognizes that the work that he needs to do, the message that he needs to share, the model that he needs to be to share with the world so that we can see how it is that we might best live our lives. He needs to do that somewhere away from those centers of power so we get to see it for at least a little while. We have to be able to see Jesus in this light. In this time of Epiphany. He is not exactly as we've pictured him and talked about him. And that's our fault. Within the Big C church and all the different denominations and buildings and seminaries and all that stuff, we haven't taught that to folks. And if we don't teach it, how are people going to learn? It's time for us to learn. It's time for us to hear. It's time for us to see that Jesus chose differently, and if we're going to follow, we need to make different choices too. Embracing diversity is not political correctness. It is faithfulness. Let me say that one more time. Embracing diversity is not political correctness. It is faithfulness. Jesus did this time and time again. Economic background didn't matter. Cultural background didn't matter. Religious background didn't matter. LGBT, they don't talk about it, but I'm guessing. Love your neighbor as yourself didn't matter. Race didn't matter. Jesus comes to one and all, serves one and all, embraces one and all. This is our call. Let's embrace it too.